Greetings. I'm reading Suits and Chancery. I'm in the part of Maxims and Principles of Adjudication. And I am in section 47 where it reads, Equity delights in equality. This maxim is sometimes more strongly expressed thus, equality is equity. The common law delighted in preferences. It was the law of the people fond of distinctions in personal rank, in social positions, in forms of procedure, in evidences of debt, and in forms of action. But the Chancery Court, early in its history, endeavored to break down these distinctions insofar as property was concerned. Joint obligations were made several. Liens were apportioned. Contribution was enforced among co-contractors, co-sureties, and co-legatees. And the estates of debtors were divided ratably among their creditors. These changes in the common law, thus enforced originally in equity, have long since, by statute or other wish, become a part of the general law of the land. In accordance with this equitable maxim, a court of chancery will divide a common fund equally between those entitled, and if the fund is not sufficient to pay it all in full, a pro rata distribution will be ordered. So, when a common when a common liability rests upon several persons in favor of a single claimant, as where several persons owe the same debt, a court of chancery will require each person so liable to discharge an equal proportion of the liability, or if any one of them should pay more than his share, equity will require the others to contribute enough to make good the excess. Where an insolvent partnership, an insolvent corporation, or an insolvent estate is wound up in chancery, the court always proceeds upon the principle that equality is equity, and apportions the assets pro rata among all the creditors, preferring none unless they have prior liens. Listen to that, unless they have prior liens. Right? So this is why a security right is important, to have a lien on property, on assets. That way it can secure your position as creditor. The same rule prevails when in any case any creditor files a bill on behalf of all other creditors to wind up the business of a debtor under a general assignment. This is interesting. The same rules prevails when in any case any creditor files a bill. A bill is an order to pay on behalf of all other creditors. So he has to be older in due course to wind up the business of a debtor under a general assignment. Okay? So that's the debtor, the all caps under assignment. So we could assign it maybe over to public office, maybe even the assign it over to the tax department, for a wind up. Who knows? Maybe that can be done. So getting back to this, so where there is not enough money to pay, which we don't have in this society, all the legacies in full, equity will make a pro rata deduction from each. What's a pro rata deduction? Let's see what's a pro rata, right? Definition of pro rata. What is that? It says, as the pound has fallen consistently. What is this? Pro rata. Proportional. Pro rata is an adverb or an adjective meaning in equal proportions. There you go. See? They can just say that, but they choose to use the word pro rata from each. Okay, it says here, and so it may be stated in general terms that whenever there is a common burden, it must be borne equally by all, and when there is a common benefit, it must be shared equally by all. Of course, this maxim will not prevent parties by contract among themselves, private contract, changing the operations of this general rule. A private contract, private agreements can change this. Yeah, you can privately make an agreement for securing a right, interest, so on and so forth. Section 48, equity will undo what fraud has done. Fraud, in the sight of a court of equity, vitiates every contract or transaction into which it enters at the election of the injured party. And the court will not only undo what fraud has done, but will treat acts as done which fraud prevented from being done. All courts require good faith in dealings between men. Listen, between men, not persons, men. And reprobate bad faith. But as the courts of common law respected forms and ceremonies, forms, not substance, and would not look beneath a seal, nor behind a writing, nor beyond the verdict of a jury, nor allow a judgment to be questioned, fraud took advantage of these rules and made forms, writings, seals, verdicts, and judgments its instrumentalities and agencies in effecting its nefarious schemes for the undoing of weak and inexperienced, the trusting of the needy. Yeah, that's what's happening right now. Fraud in all kinds of forms. Fraud, because it's all forms, not substance. When, however, equity established her courts, she disregarded forms. See there, forms, disregarded forms, discredited ceremonies, peered beneath the seals, looked behind the writings, meaning the intentions, questioned the verdicts of juries, and did not hesitate to set aside the solemn judgment of courts when found to be unjust and procured by fraud. This is why we want to bring it in equity, because these courts of these inferior courts are all based on the presumptions, which when you really look at it, you can find fraud, but then it's hard to determine fraud because then you have to prove intent. So court of equity set aside deeds or converted them into mortgages, set aside the verdicts of juries in court of laws, and awarded new trials, and forbade the enforcement of judgments when good reason and good conscience required. Whatever fraud touched was declared to be vitiated. Wherever fraud trod was declared unholy ground, and whatever fraud did was pronounced null and void. All the haunts of fraud were laid bare. All of its paths, however crooked, were signboarded. All of its subterfuges pointed out. I don't know that word. Subterfuges pointed out. All of its false coins branded, and all of its allies detected and marked with badges. Fraud has been so crippled and hedged out by the Chancery Court that its power to deceive and do evil has been much weakened, and the remedies for its rascalities much increased, but it has not yet gone out of business. Let's read the footnotes here really quick. This footnote right here is very impressive. So it says 34, a man cannot serve two masters at the same time, especially in the case of conflicting trusts, right? Public and private trust. There you go. This is from Denning versus Todd. Whatever is acquired by the servant is acquired by the master. That would be like the principal and agent, or I think, well, not really, but it'd be like the man being the master of the all caps, with his all caps. Whatever profit a trustee makes out of a trust property, it is the profit of the beneficiary. The parable of the talents well illustrates this rule of equity. Our legal nomenclature. What is this word? Nomenclature. Let me see. Nomenclature. What the heck is this word? Nomenclature. The devising or choosing of names for things, especially in a science or other discipline. Nomenclature. Well, I'm trying to...
Nomenclature.
Nomenclature. Okay, there you go. Our legal nomenclature, the designation of name, is deficient in the satisfactory terms to express the relations of a general trustee and a general correlative of such trustee. The term trustee, while a good one, has been largely appropriated to denote an express trustee, and the terms beneficiary and cestake trust inadequately express the entire class of persons, inadequately expressed, for whose benefit implied trusts are created and implied frauds constructed, inasmuch as in almost every variety of trust there is an express or implied relation of confidence. It is with reluctance and misgivings suggested that the word confidor appropriately and not inadequately denotes and includes everyone who expressly or implied confides or trusts, and the word confidee equally as well denotes and includes everyone in whom confidence or trust is expressly or implied reposed. Equity is equality, as it were. Interesting. Very nice. Very, very nice. So, let me just finish reading this and we're done. As physicians diagnose internal disease by certain external signs, so courts of chancery diagnose the existence of fraud by certain signs termed badges of frauds, which are treated of elsewhere. In courts of law, it is a maxim that fraud is odious and not to be presumed, by which is meant that before so detestable a crime can be imputed to anyone, it must be proved. It must be proved before you can impute anyone with being a criminal. But courts of chancery, while considering fraud more odious than do courts of law, they nevertheless, in certain cases, presume fraud. That is, certain states or fact are considered in chancery incompatible with an honest purpose, and when proved or admitted, fraud is presumed. Courts of chancery will ordinarily impute fraud to a party on less evidence than is required in courts of law. On less evidence. Okay. And they allow a much greater latitude of proof in the search for fraud and a more minute examination of witnesses. And whatever the shapes and disguises fraud has invented in the refinements and diversities of commerce, listen to that, commerce, and the progress of civilization, the courts of equity have always been able to detect and expose it, to redress the wrong done by it, and to keep the odious, regardless of the rank or wealth of the perpetrator. This is Suits and Chancery by Henry Gibson. Let me see if I can bring that up for you. It's lagging, but there we go. Yes, here we go. And sheesh. Nope, it's not coming up. Yes, there we go. A treatise on suits and chancery, setting forth the principles, pleadings, practices, proofs, and processes of the jurisprudence of equity, and giving numerous illustrative forms, pleadings, writs, orders, reports, decrees, and other proceedings in suits and chancery from their beginning to their end. Boom. Henry R. Gibson. Well, guys, thank you for watching. That's all for today. Let me see if I can get this done here. Boom.